Let's stop doing that because tomorrow is not promised. As we know, a lot of people have passed away. So let's start doing things that we need to do now. Let's start investing in ourselves. We invest in the outside of ourselves, but we're not investing in the inside of ourselves. We're not investing in the long terms of finances, of health, of mental health, of overall wellness. We're not investing in that for us, and we need to start doing that. So my first guest I want to welcome, I've talked to her personally myself for finances. Ariana Stowe is a CEO, entrepreneur, founder of Ariana Stowe Fitness and Financial Planning Firm. One thing I want to say before she jumps on and talks is if you need financial assistance and if your money is not moving the way you want it to move and you feel stuck and you're saying, well, I'm broke, I can't contact her. Let's stop doing that because she does offer consultations. And if you can get what you need from a consultation, please do that. Let's stop making excuses. Let's ask, hey, do you have payment plans? Because sometimes people have payment plans. I personally have payment plans. So ask for that because you never know what you can get that can change your life. So Ariana, thank you for being a part of this to help make some changes. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So happy to be here with you all. Thank you so much, Lejeune, for asking me to be a part of today's events. And, I want to give a little bit of context, right, to kind of how I got here, because I am unlike probably most of you listening to this call. I definitely didn't necessarily get the information that I needed from a financial standpoint growing up, right? Because we know, unfortunately, in our community that information is not readily recycled and available to even understand. And, I think at the end of the day, like it's really going to take the generation that we're in now, us that are, really thriving and becoming young adults to learn it, pass it back, pay it forward so that we can be better as a community. So a little bit about how I got here and, some of the habits that I've had to overcome financially. And so we're going to zoom forward quite a bit in my life. 2019, I started my first business. So I left corporate. I was out. I was tired of the system, so to speak, and really felt like I could do things on my own in the best way possible. Started my fitness company, Ariana Stowe Fitness, was doing hybrid training in person and online. The whole pandemic happens, as we all know, gyms shut down, and I lose half of my income overnight. And at the time I was, 28 or 29 years old. And that was my first time ever experiencing like financial insecurity. And I thought to myself, wow, like how little I am prepared for the unexpected, right? And who else is in this situation? And we know a lot of people financially were really hit hard when they stopped working, right? As of now, even today, 65% of Americans are not prepared and will not be able to financially survive retirement. And this is really relevant for women in particular because we generally live into our mid-90s. And so we literally have a whole 30 plus year, right, runway to have to fund and take care of from a financial standpoint. So it's really, really important that we know how to manage our money. And so when that happened, I started soul searching and was like, okay, listen, maybe maybe fitness isn't my retirement plan. Maybe I'm not gonna like do this forever because clearly I'm not even in control of the gym or whatever. So we might need to figure something else out. And, as I started kind of looking to see what else was out there that I could still run as a business, my financial advisor reached out to me so that they were hiring the DC office. And so I started my firm. Started the process of starting the firm back in July of last year. And so, some things that I've seen from a habit standpoint in that time frame is that I think women aren't often empowered to be able to stand on their own 2 feet financially. I think a lot of the rhetoric and messaging that's out there really sometimes, and I thought that this was going to be my situation as well, as like a man, a partner, whoever is going to take care of us, right? But number one, women are now the breadwinners, right? In some cases, we're earning more in our household. And so what does that need to look like, right? If that's not necessarily your situation. And also, does it even need to be the situation in the first place, right? Because no matter what, we don't know what tomorrow holds. So we've got to be better financially prepared. And so throughout this process, you know, some of the basic habits that we want to start with, right? So do I have the ability to share a screen, Lejeune? Yeah, okay. So I want to share something with you all because this is pretty much, oh, it says it's disabled. Let's see. What I want to share with you all are 5 key actions, right, that at a minimum are going to help you to have better financial security as a whole. And so I'll share the visual once we get the screen sharing enabled. There we go. And there it goes. Okay, perfect. So give me a thumbs up if y'all can see this. Yes? Okay, perfect. So 5 key actions. What are like basic habits of financial security, right? Because I think sometimes we just don't know where to start when it comes to creating good habits. And we also don't know who to talk to because we don't know who to trust. And so when we think about 5 key actions, number 1, we have to manage the money that we have. Some of the best conversations that I have are with clients who feel like they need to work 2 to 3 to 4 jobs because I live here in the DC, Maryland area. It's expensive, right? And I get it. But oftentimes we just need to be better stewards of the income that we have coming in and get better at managing our spending. And so outside of your discretionary funds, this is the ratio that I like to get my clients on, which is 20% to savings, 60% towards your fixed expenses, and 20% towards discretionary, right? And so if you can manage your spending and get to a point where the things that you absolutely have to pay for fall within 60%, you're going to be moving in a really strong direction. So that's number 1. It's like you got to manage what you spend by covering what you need, what you owe, and what you want. So I don't necessarily want you not to do the things that you enjoy. And I never actually advise my clients not to do that. I say, okay, cool. What are your goals? Here are the dollars that we need to set aside to reach those goals: buying a home, saving for retirement, education for kids, whatever it is, right? Having I call it an FU fund, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But, you know, what are the things that we need to set aside to make that happen? Because once you reach those goals, y'all, you can then do whatever you want with your cash, because as long as that emergency fund is covered, whatever the situation is, we're good to go, right? Now, the next area is grow. So a lot of times the messaging and marketing that's in the finance space, which is very noisy, all right, and most people are not even qualified to be saying that. So please take what you see on social media with a grain of salt, TikTok, all of that. Because a lot of times we don't have the proper funds saved up to even cover the amount of growth that we're seeking. You really want to be mindful that you're not over leveraged in any one area, in stocks, in investing, in real estate, because all of those markets we don't control, right? But once you have that safety net in place, then we can talk about growing the money, right? Because ultimately, especially for women, as I shared, you are going to need a lot more resources than you realize right now, later down the line. And later down the line, you're not going to have the same amount of timeline, right? Like when we think about investing, the most important thing to consider is the time horizon of at what point that you want to access the money. So if you're like, okay, I want to put dollars aside in order to have a certain pot of money down the line, what does that down the line mean? Is it 20 years? Is it 30 years? Is it 10 years, right? Because that's going to help you to figure out, well, what do I need to put down at what average rate of return to get to that number? Or I probably could start with $100 a month because I'm not touching this for 25 years, right? So you really got to think about what that time horizon looked like based on the goals and of course your age, right? But that's when we want to get into growing the money. Very important that it matches your goals, your timeline, as I shared, also your tolerance for risk. So there's a lot of different investment options that are for someone who's a little more risky and isn't afraid to lose what they spend, right? But this is why that safety net's really important. Because if you're a risky person and you're like, listen, Ariana, if $10,000, if I invest that and I lose it in 5 years, I'm cool with that. You also need to make sure that there's $10,000 to cover that loss, right? Now, the next piece with the financial security is you want to make sure that your assets are protected. I think one of the most important and quote unquote bad habits that I see is that we want to grow it, we want to budget, but we don't even think about protecting our wealth. When we have conversations about generational wealth, especially for Black families, it's not always about the fact that we have some lack of assets and knowledge and we don't have property and things of that nature. We also need to consider the amount of wealth that left our families because of the unprepared and unexpected events. Someone passed away, they didn't have life insurance, so we had to pay out of pocket for the funeral. You know, we had to pay to relocate the family. Like, all of these resources are spent and spent and spent because we just didn't have that preparation. Or think about when you have to take in a loved one, right? We would call that in our world like a long-term care event, nursing home, hospice care, even just taking care of someone. There's an emotional toll that takes on women in particular that are caregivers, right? And that emotional toll actually also affects how you possibly show up at work, which affects your paycheck, not to mention the amount of money that is being dished out to take care of that person, especially if they don't have any insurance, right? And so in those situations, that means you're either dipping into retirement to pay those monthly costs, which ultimately means down the line, there's going to be less money that you're passing down for your legacy. So I literally can't stress this enough. This is probably the number one habit that I think people really just overlook, is that the wealth has to be protected. Now, as we move along this timeline, you know, another thing is, I think a lot of us get into the habit of wanting to do more with our money from a giving standpoint, but we don't always have the capacity and the resources to give at the way that's actually going to affect change. You know, I think about this from like a political lens, you know, social justice lens, all that good stuff, as well as charitable organizations. But if you really want to be able to leave a lasting impact, to really see the things move and the things that you care about, you're going to need resources to do that, right? So let's start thinking and getting into the habit of thinking beyond our day-to-day and our future and our legacy, and also think about ways we want our finances to affect change at a really, really large level philanthropically. But in order to do that, we have to have the resources, right? And then, of course, really the most important thing along this scale is we've got to get into the habit of saving our dollars, right? Now, the beauty with saving is, I already told you our ratio today, 20% of your net income, right? So 20% of what you bring in, you want to put away. That's the goal. As long as you're anywhere between 0 to 20%, you're moving in the right direction. Now, how do you want to think about saving? On the front end, if you are a renter, 3 months of your net income. So if you make $5,000 a month, emergency fund of $15,000, okay? And all you want to do is just reverse engineer that 15K, divide that by 12 months, and that's how much you need to save on a monthly basis from what you earn. And what I highly suggest, yep, that always happens, the dog barks when I'm talking. What I highly suggest is that you, okay, he's good, is that you put away at least, you just auto draft it on your paycheck, right? So as your paycheck gets paid every 2 weeks, you're just putting aside a little bit of that monthly amount into an account, preferably something that you can't touch, all right? A lot of my clients enjoy credit unions because you physically have to go into the credit union to withdraw the money. So that alone makes it a little bit more difficult for you to touch those dollars, right? And so that's pretty much the baseline. And then if you're a homeowner, you want that to be at least 6 months of your expenses, of your net income saved up, God forbid something happens. So don't get into the habit of over saving, right? Because once you exceed those numbers, you need to do something else with that cash. I mean, sitting in a savings account isn't growing at the same rate as an investment or as a permanent life insurance product or something else. It's not going to grow at that same rate sitting in that savings account. So you definitely just want to hit those two numbers, okay? I'm going to pause for the dog. Any questions so far?
So Ariana, can you talk about like investments? Because I know people fear doing stocks and bonds because they're afraid that they're going to lose the money, or they've heard horror stories, and it's so many different stocks that's out there, like the Jack and Jill or something like that. So can you kind of talk about that and what people should consider to invest in, and even when it comes to banks, like the savings accounts and things that may bring them money?
So with investing, right, a lot of the fears are more so less about doing it and more about the lack of knowledge of how to do it, right? So that's what the world of financial services professionals, wealth management advisors, that's part of our role, is to provide some level of education so that you understand what it is that you're even doing in the first place, right? So I would say on a high level, right, if you really want to do it and you don't know how, seek out a professional to learn what the next steps are, right? Now, I'll give you a little insight as to a few pieces of information to think about with investing. So number one, there's a lot of investment tools, platforms, apps, et cetera, that are out there in the marketplace, right? Not every tool is created equal. So you want to go for a company like a Fidelity or a Vanguard that gives you the most ability to do all different types of investments. If you want to do options, if you want to do crypto, if you want to do this, you want to do that, right? Because sometimes you feel you go into it thinking you're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and then you can, and then you got to transfer the money out of the account, you got to pay a fee. So do a little research on number one, like the platform that you want to use. My particular preference is for Fidelity, right? And I'm not paid to share that. But that's usually where I start clients out with. Now, you can also go the route of having someone to manage the investment account on your behalf, right? There's fees associated with that. Typically with Northwestern Mutual, we start, which is the company I'm affiliated with, we start at $25,000. So if you don't have $25,000 to invest, then you want to start your own route, right? You can still talk to a professional to get an idea of what to invest in and all those good things, how to get started, how to open an account, all of that. But you can do things on your own. Got it? Now, when it comes to how to get into investing, you can look at this from two different lenses. You can look at this from the lens of, let me actually own a piece, right? So when you own a stock, you own a percentage of ownership in that company. So you want to think about, okay, what would it look like to own a piece of the things that I consume on a daily basis? So if you got Nike shoes in your closet, we got Apple iPhones, right? At a minimum, these are some of the things that you want to start investing in, because again, they're things that you're already consuming on a daily basis. You might as well have a piece of that ownership, right? And I'll plug a colleague of mine who's really, really good with beginner stock investment. Her name is Ashley Fox. Highly recommend. She has tons of courses on how to get started. You can also invest in the real estate market. There's a lot of different things you can invest in, but she's definitely an expert in that space. But that's one way to look at it. What are the things that I'm consuming on a regular basis? How do I get into the habit of not just consuming, but also owning a piece of ownership? So that's point A. Another route could be, what would it look like to invest in a group of companies based on a certain industry that I have an interest in supporting? So let's say you like renewable energy. You can literally Google renewable energy mutual funds, and then it's going to give you like a list of different groups of stocks, right? It might be 1,000 stocks involved, it might be 500 stocks involved. And the main thing you want to look at is not only the performance, right, in terms of the return of that investment, but also at what point were the peaks and valleys of that overall investment. So let's say over the last 10 years, it's been trending up, might be a good group of companies to invest in, which are called mutual funds, index funds, et cetera. So the difference is you can either put money into a single individual company, right? Apple, Nike, Amazon, et cetera. And you can actually own a percentage of a share as well. So you don't have to buy a full share because Amazon's like over $1,000, whatever it is. You can get a percentage of that and then keep dumping money into that, like I shared earlier. If your time horizon is really long, $100 a month is really great to start. Or take that same 100 and invest it into a group of stocks that you feel like you're aligned with. Renewable energy is really good. Tech is really amazing, et cetera. You can also invest into like the top companies in the United States, right? So when you are looking at a portfolio, you're going to notice a breakdown of a percentage of what's involved in it. So you might have a percentage of stocks, bonds, et cetera. If you are more risky, you're going to have more stocks. And if you're less risky, you're going to have less stocks and more bonds and other things involved in that portfolio. So it's really ultimately based on your own tolerance, right? How you would feel if this money were to go to zero. If you invested money and you lost it, or it was negative, how would you feel about that? If you feel uneasy about that, then you're probably moderate to conservative. If you're just like, you know what, I don't mind, I can make it back, I have that much in savings, then you might be able to do something more risky, which would mean more stocks. So hopefully that was helpful to kind of answer your question, Lejeune. Let me know if there's anything else, but it's not hard. You just are lacking some basic information that I hope I was able to share, because you have a lot of ways that you can approach this, right? And if your approach is like, I want to be hands off, then you definitely want to seek out a professional that can manage it on your behalf. So you just know that it's at least happening. I think at the end of the day, we all need to just have something that's growing for our future goals.
And one last thing, can you explain the difference from a budget and a plan? Because I think a lot of people get confused with a budget and a plan. They think it's the same thing, and the words are two different words. So can you break that down for us?
Absolutely. So a budget is no more than an analysis of your current cash flow. It doesn't take into account what you actually want to do with the money. It is your understanding and your analysis of where you're currently at financially, right? So that's something that we should periodically be in tune with, especially as our life changes, things come up, etc., right? A financial plan, in contrast, is your roadmap of your overall financial security, where you want to be today, tomorrow, and 15 years from now. When you hire financial planners, right, our job is to make sure that we're thinking on your behalf 15 to 20 to 30 to 40 years down the line, and we're in front of the things that you might not be thinking about. Things like your tax level changing over time and how that's going to affect your bottom line. Things like, again, once you have assets in place, what does it look like to even pay off your liabilities, and how does that change your net worth? Things like legacy, right? So a plan is thinking very comprehensively about, what are my current goals, right? Where do I want to be in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years? And what is it strategically going to take to get there, so that when I analyze my cash flow, going back to the budget, it has a purpose. One of the bad habits that I see along those lines, Lejeune, is that people don't tailor their budgets with the end goal in mind, because a lot of us, given circumstances, situations, family, trauma, whatever, really only can think about the next day, right? A lot of us, I have so many clients that tell me that I really can only exist in the present moment when it comes to my finances. It's very hard for me to think further down the line, right? And I totally empathize with that, which is why even more so, you need some level of accountability to actually help you believe, right? And think beyond what's currently possible in your situation. And that's what a financial plan provides.
Thank you for the clarity, because yeah, I've talked to people and they're like, well, I have a budget, and it's like, well, the budget and the plan is not the same, but maybe you can talk to someone to explain it. But you hear that, well, I don't have the money to talk to them, I don't have money right now. And it's not about, it's someone who can help you, even if you don't have the money right now, to understand how to get the money or look at things differently when it comes to the money coming in. So I'm sure, you've had people come in and or talk to people, or, on the street, and they're like, well, I don't have money to meet with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to that point, right, even in the financial services world, there are two different types of options, right? You can hire an advisor that's fee-based, right? Meaning that there's an upfront cost to do all of the planning, to basically map out your entire life, to make sure that you're set up, because this relationship is ongoing. So we initially have a conversation in year one, and then we're updating and moving as your life transitions year after year over that. But there's also financial advisors who don't charge those fees, right? You still might have to pay for different products and services that they would then earn a commission from. We're not necessarily doing this out of the total goodness of our heart. But I think the important thing is that, again, there's not always a high barrier of entry, because this is so important for the information not only to be received, but also for people to take action on that information. So I think over the years, it's really expanded to not only being a lot more diverse, right? We still got a lot of work to do so that it accurately represents the market, but also that there's less barriers of entry to have the conversations with the professionals, with the people that need it.
And I know you're also in fitness. This is one last thing. So if you can definitely explain how wealth, health, and wellness tie in together, because I think a lot of people don't really understand the connection, because if you are broke or you are in a state of depression financially, it does affect your health. You tend to end up having chronic illness, you're stressed out, high blood pressure, you're overeating, or you're drinking, or you're finding whatever new addiction to go into. So if you can talk about that from your perspective of being a fitness expert.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I think there's two pieces to that. Number one is the more we make the correlation from a discipline standpoint, that the discipline in one area is the same discipline that we need to apply in the other, the higher probability that we'll be able to create change. And so for those listening and watching that are doing really well financially, not doing well on the health side, you've actually already proven to yourself what's possible. You just need to transfer the skill set into the other area and vice versa. If you're really committed in the health side, there's truly no reason why money-wise you should be struggling maybe at the way that you are right now, because you've already proven to yourself the possibility. So a lot of times people need to zoom out and actually see the entire truth and not continue to believe the stories that they have been working against for their entire life. Like it can be it's an either or thing, and instead start to create the and. Like, I am financially disciplined and I'm a person that takes care of my body. Those things can harmoniously coexist, because if I can do it in one area, I know and believe that I can do it in the other. And you just take the same steps, right? You start with overall analyzing your current lifestyle. Are you trying to do what you did in your 20s and your 40s? Different lifestyle, different level of responsibilities, different health, different body, right? So if you can accept the fact that that journey needs to be different, just like you at some point accepted the fact that your finances need to be different, again, it's going to start to really click, right? The second thing I would say to that question is, a lot of times when it comes to connecting the dots between fitness and wellness, you want to approach the fact that, like, if I'm already struggling in one area, let's not add to it, right? So what is something that's in my control? If I can't control the rate of pay that I'm currently at until I'm up for a promotion, okay, cool. What I can control is how I manage my money, literally all the 5 points of financial security that we went over, right? What I'm also in control of is what I can physically do and what I have the ability to do on the health side. Because what I do know, right, either from your own experience, watching, unfortunately, any family members decline, is that strain on the health side only adds to whatever strain that you're going through financially. So at some point, we got to make a decision, right? I say this quote to my clients often that I learned in a book, is that decisions and debates. So as soon as you decide what it is that you're going to focus on and how you're going to move forward with that, with the plan and all the things that we've been chatting about, then we don't need to debate whether or not we're actually going to do it, because we already know how detrimental it would be to the overall livelihood if I were to add any health challenges on top of whatever I'm going through financially. So we have to really get in front of that, right? And seek help, and don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, one thing I want to add, and it's just an analogy that I feel like I've been sharing all week that I received in therapy. When I told her, I said, I'm just riding the wave of entrepreneurship. The wave is either up or down, and I'm just kind of floating along, and eventually it's going to be smooth sailing, right? And what she told me was so profound. She said, but where are you at in the wave? Is the wave on top of you? Are you trying to swim against the current? Like, where are you at in this wave? And wouldn't it be easier if you got on a boat? So often, especially as Black women, we see boats passing us by and we do not get on. We don't even reach for the oar, Lejeune, right? So there's been so many opportunities for support in either of these areas that we've been too afraid, too ashamed, right? Too scared just to have the conversation. And that's all ego, because the reality is the boats are not going to keep passing by. Eventually, something is going to happen that's going to force you to get on the boat, when the reality is we could have just eased in at our own pace and our own time at a different point. So I think, again, when we talk about this fitness and finance connection, it is that, right? Like, we need to stop swimming against the current and thinking that we can do it all on our own, and actually start to reach out for the help and support that we need.
Thank you so much. If you can provide your information in the chat where people can connect with you. Again, like I said, I connected with her in August, and she gave me a lot of perspective on things that I didn't think about, as far as my why. Why do I want the money? You know, what do I want my legacy to be? Because we don't think about those things because we want it now, 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 now. And I am a person where my coach just told me, stop saying you want it now, like the JG Wentworth commercial. Stop saying it, because you have to resolve the things that's not working, of why you're not attracting it. So with that being said, I'm going to bring up the next wonderful guest. I've had her on for 3 or 4 of my events. She is so great. Her name is Margaret. She's a psychotherapist, co-founder of United Paths LLC Mental Health Services. Thank you for joining me, Margaret. Always love to have you on. So if you can talk about the mental side of why people, if they're experiencing depression, suicidal ideation, especially around finances, because I think finances is one of the biggest things that we stress out about, that we become sick about, and also just in general with health, because I don't think people understand how our health and mental health and what we're eating and those things tying together.
This always happens. Thank you so much, LaJune, for having me on here. I think we've been doing this for quite some time now, and it's always a pleasure to join you here. And Ariana, thank you so much for sharing your area of expertise, because as a mental health therapist, I see so many of the barriers with my clients to even get to see a financial advisor. So a lot of things that you were saying resonated with me, because also as a Black woman too, you know, I started this journey with 3 other women, and we started a business. And from a business perspective, and as a mental health therapist and a Black woman, we weren't even thinking about our finances, the legacy that we want to leave. And so, of course, like, we're learning now that, wow, like, we're experiencing financial trauma where we are afraid to write down contracts. We are afraid to talk about money. We're afraid to, you know, ask for raises and all that stuff, right? So obviously, like, some of the things that we're also experiencing in our personal life, we get to see that in our clients. And so I wanted to focus more on like the financial trauma piece of, like, you know, all these things. And, you know, financial trauma is any experience that negatively impacts your relationship with money. And this includes, you know, your belief about money, how you use money, whether you deserve money, whether you grew around, you know, because a lot of times I meet with clients and they would say, well, I came from a well-off family that, you know, but even then, that trauma that your parents, as a Black individual or as an immigrant individual, whatever experience your parents or families had to go through, you're impacted by that. Because we, you know, now we're learning that trauma like lives in it stores in your body. And so many of us associate money with stress, lack of security, feelings of unworthiness. And so a lot of the times I always bring up the stress cycle, because, you know, there's a difference between stress and a stressor. Now, a stressor is walking down the street and seeing a tiger. It can be, you know, your relationship with your family, your relationship with money, your mental health, they're all stressors, right? And how we experience these stressors are, our emotional and our physiological reaction to whatever stressor that's going on in our lives. So if clients are showing up and they're saying, hey, like, I'm having a difficult time, we always go through a checklist. And oftentimes you see that, okay, well, finances is a big piece, and it impacts how they show up for themselves. It impacts how they show up to friends. And it also, like, there are so many factors that affects our relationships with money. As a Black individual, we have to deal with racism and oppression. So these are all things that you have to, like, keep in mind. And so some of the things that we actually show, when we're experiencing these stress in our lives, in which I said a stressor is like equivalent to like you walking down the street and seeing a tiger, the first thing you're asking yourself is, how am I going to survive this, right? And so a lot of times when it comes to finances or even any, bad habits, sometimes we feel shameful to talk about it, right? We're scared. So we either try to, like, run away from the situation. So there's a whole, like, that fight or flight experience. Sometimes we dissociate ourselves from, that particular, if we had a debt, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to deal with it. So we avoid it. We freeze, or like we act like it's not even there. It's like this elephant in the room, but we're not going to talk about it, which then it also impacts your mental health because you're stuck in this negative feedback where you see a tiger, which is a financial stressor, and you're just like, I'm just going to act like it's not there. So what we're seeing is that when you avoid to address these financial stressors, there's an increase in adrenaline. You're constantly stressed out, which then impacts your health. It impacts your mental health. So you're not able to sleep. You're not taking care of yourself. You're depressed. You're sad, right? And so some of the signs that we also get to, individuals experience and we see is like financial avoidance. So you're not opening your bills, you put that away. And we describe that as a freeze response. So if you're avoiding your finances, you're in that freeze response where you don't want to deal with it and you're stuck there. We also see overspending, right? And also social media does not help because wherever you turn, you're being bombarded by so many ads where buy this. And of course, like, it also doesn't help that now we have Klarna, we have, so you're buying all these things, paying it later, but it's still not, not helpful. It's not helping your mental health. We see underspending, where there's so many of us, even though we're doing so well for ourselves, there's just this fear and scarcity around money, lack of boundary. Like I said initially, being afraid of, like, negotiating your salary or like writing down a contract as a business owner. And so some of the remedies to deal with that is you always want to talk about your difficulties, right? You always want to be open. I always tell my clients, how you show up to me is how you show up to your friends and your family members. So I need you to be honest with yourself, most importantly, and talk about your difficulties, because when you don't talk about it, no one is, there's so many people around that are willing to help. There's so many information on the internet around us. So if you're not willing to talk about it, you're going to be suffering in silence. You also want to be taking a really internal inventory of, like, why is it that you're spending, or you're overspending or underspending, all those fears. One of the things that I also do is I use cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like challenging these irrational thoughts that shows up, because a lot of the times it's fear that's driving you. It's anxiety. Anxiety is good. It's an alarm system that tells you that, whatever you're worried about, you care about, right? And so we want to be able to figure out, like, how we plan in so that you're not going into that mode where you're so worried that you're not planning for your future. And I enjoyed everything that Ariana said, because it, sometimes we think that everything is stands on its own, And I am a firm believer that it needs to be a collaborative approach where, you know, as an individual, you're checking in with your doctors yearly about, you know, your health, but it's also important for you to check in with your mental health. It's important for you to check in about your finances because they all are interconnected. And so taking care of that also propels you on a path where you're good with yourself, and you know, you can also be a blessing to other people in your life, and you know, enjoy this journey, because there's no final destination, right? There's so many of us that we think that, you know, if I get this money, then I'm going to be okay. If I get to this point, then I'm going to, but it's never like that, because with more money, with all these things comes other responsibilities that you have to worry about. So as a journey that keeps on going and requires you to be disciplined, live a life of discipline, and talk about the things that bothers you, talk about, be open about it. And so that's a little bit that I have to share. I don't know if anyone has questions.
I do, because as you touched on money trauma, I just literally learned about that this year. And I honestly did not know that was a thing. Me and Ariana talked about that in our session when I met with her, where you don't really know where your trauma started, where, you know, it's example, you saw your parents struggling financially and you said to yourself, that would never be me. Or if you were in an abusive situation where your partner continued to give you money to try to blanket the abuse, or if you were sexually assaulted like I was, the molester used to give me money. So I realized that every time I got money, I was pushing it away because I didn't have that. I had a negative relationship with money. So if you can, you know, talk about that, and I don't think people really realize that money is a relationship. And if you can kind of touch on that, because I don't think people really have that connection, because we have been taught that money is for paying bills, it's for your necessity, you're supposed to save, and that is, you know, what money is supposed to be about. Because growing up for me, I saw my mom pay bills, I saw my mom do a savings, I saw her make sure that me and my sister had the best of the best, but she went without. So that thing of trying to personally make sure, for me, I don't want to be like my mom because I don't want to be in debt. So when you say that, it's like, okay, well, you're saying to the universe, yeah, you really want that, because that is the opposite of what you're doing. So if you can kind of touch on that.
Yeah, you know, I personally too, like I grew up with parents that like worked 80 hours a week, right? And, you know, and they continue to work like that. And a lot of the times when we focus on that negative aspect of that relationship, right, it kind of informs us to like live out in the fear of like, okay, well, I don't want to live that kind of lifestyle. I want to be able to like retire at a younger age and not really work so hard that it impacts my mental health. And so one of the things that I think it's important for us to like focus on is that whatever we pay attention to grows, right? Whatever we don't pay attention to dies. And so what kind of standards are you trying to create for yourself? Those were the standards that your parents did, you know, that's what worked for them. And for me, I had to really work and understand that my parents were in survival mode, right? And if I don't want to live in survival mode, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to do differently? And so figuring out, okay, what are some of the things that you can commit to? So if trauma lives in our body, and sometimes we inherit these trauma characteristics, so does, you know, joy and wealth also is in our body, and we can also unlock that. And so one of the things that I always tell everyone is that it's okay, you know, it's important for us to like normalize our relationship with money. I think it's uncomfortable. For me, I grew up with like thinking that I have to be humble about everything, right? So we don't talk about, I want to be rich. We don't talk about, these are some of the things that I'm doing to, you know, set myself, my relationship with money on a great path. Because then if you did that, you were seen as arrogant, like you were seen as like, whatever, like you're worshiping money, right? And so it's important for us to like normalize talking about money, but also it's important for us to understand, in terms of like our relationship with money, understand what it does to our nervous system, right? So if someone is talking about money, and you're triggered by it, it's important for you to like take, reflect on that and figure out like, what is, how come I feel so, what are some of these emotional zaps that are coming up for me, and what do I do with it? Is it because, for instance, I had a client that, we were talking about money, and she was just like, yeah, and like one of my friends kept telling me that I was broke, like I was, and she said it 3 times, and that triggered me, and I was really upset with her. And so we sort of like processed this, and it's like, well, what is the standard that you're creating for yourself? Now, if you're going out there and like you're sharing the narrative that you're this like badass woman and like is rich, but really behind closed doors you're struggling financially, that will trigger you if other people are saying something that is not, congruent to your own reality, right? And so what is your truth, right? If your truth is that you're not, if your truth is that you're not broke, then no one can tell you anything that you don't know about yourself, right? Because a lot of times too, what I'm finding out is that our relationship, a lot of our friends, family members are projecting their own reality on us. So, right. So in terms of like our relationship with money, it's important for us to start with ourselves. What's our relationship with our money? Because if I know my reality and I am dedicated to my own truth, then it doesn't matter what, social media is pushing on down your throat. It doesn't matter what your friends are telling you, because your truth is your truth and you're dedicated to your truth. The other thing too is that it's important to work on decreasing shame around financial behaviors, and be able to like separate yourself from the narrative, instead of like, I'm bad with money, like, Ariana said, being able to, have the and not so much, live in the state of either or, right? If, I am financially struggling right now, and I'm working towards to liberating myself and, go on this path where I can be financially successful. Because, the other thing that we also have to be mindful of, that, our tongue holds power, right? And so if we're always in the either or, it's more so working against us more than anything.
That is so true, because, you definitely have to be mindful of your words and what you're putting out for the universe,
Mm-hmm.
because basically you're saying to the universe, okay, I am broke. And the universe is like, your wish is my command.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go. You're going to be broke. So
Mm-hmm.
for you also, if you can explain how mental and financial and wellness tie in together from your perspective.
So finances and finances. I think that, when money is good, right? I think that we need to move away from the narrative of like money is this horrible thing. I'm a firm believer that if you are a kind person and a wonderful person, money doesn't necessarily changes you. Because we always used to, we grew up thinking that, money changes people, and, it turns them into these horrible things. I think money is good. When we don't have money, it does impact us. We're sad, we're shameful, it impacts our health. And so it's important for us to be able to take care of ourselves. It starts with taking care of ourselves. If you're struggling, because of finances, there's always help out there. If, you're having thoughts about ending your life because of, not having enough money, it's important to seek the help. Because yes, if you're not taking care of yourself, because I think that, I grew up with, my parents saying charity begins at home. And it doesn't matter what happens outside of the home, right? What's important is you focus on what's happening within your home and within yourself. And so you want to make sure that when you take care of yourself, it allows you and it opens this door where you're able to also focus on other things. So I always talk about, your window of tolerance. Now, when you're in your window of tolerance, there's this idea that you're able to function well. You're curious about things. And so if the correlation here with the health and finances is that if I'm taking care of myself, I'm working out, I'm eating the right foods, right? That opens the window for me to be curious about my finances, because I know that if I'm not saving and I'm always, eating out 5 days out of the week, it impacts my health, right? Now, when we go outside of our window of tolerance is when all the things happen. It's where our health is compromised. We're not taking care of ourselves. So guess what? We're eating out every day, even though we know we can't afford it. And then our finances also suffer. So, one last thing is make sure that you're always staying in your window of tolerance. And your window of tolerance grows as you stay within that. Of course, like you're going to get anxious, you're going to get angry, you're going to all these things, but you always want to know when to go back, or you want to know when you've stepped outside of your window of tolerance.
Okay. All right, thank you. Can you provide your information below for people to reach out to you
Yes.
for any questions and that was good, because I think a lot of people, don't connect those dots, and those are dots that need to be connected. So we have next Frida Wiley. She is an author, medical writer, and pharmaceutical consultant. And she's also done a lot of medical research on this and her own personal experience on this topic. So Frida, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. So my journey, especially as it relates to the narrative that links mental health to finances, is that I am a pharmacist by training. And so there was a lot of debt associated with going to school, especially going back to school. And even more so because I went to a Catholic school. And even though I was really grateful for that opportunity, there was an ongoing narrative of stress that was in my head the entire time I was in school, worried about paying back the money, worried about the interest rates and the finances. And unfortunately, some of the lessons when it came to the financial health and the mental impact kind of came to me late. And for example, the understanding of why it's important to pay interest, and the importance of trying to make sure that the interest doesn't capitalize or minimize the amount of interest that capitalizes on your student loans. And so in the School of Hard Knocks that I graduated from after pharmacy school, I started to really realize prioritization when it came to finances. So I was one of those pharmacists who lived like a pauper initially. I didn't go out and buy the brand new fancy car. I didn't buy the house initially, which I think was probably I might have done that a little bit differently just because of knowing what I know now. But buying the car was not a necessity to me. My goal was to pay off the student loans. And so I lived as leanly as possible. And I tackled the smaller bills first to get those out of the way, to make sure that I could focus on the larger debt. And when it came to that, I still tried to reward myself. I still made sure that I saved money. I still made sure that I tried to come out for a little bit of sunshine and R&R, because that is also a narrative. You work hard, but you play hard. And if you're able to, you play harder. I only had 2 weeks of vacation starting out, but that really was still my playtime. And I made sure that I fully enjoyed myself and I was fully present for that, because at the end of the day, that is part of what I was working for. So for me, part of it has been, yes, it's the school of hard knocks. And I think in communities of color, in the Black community, there is a fear of having some of these conversations when it comes to finances and mental health. There's also a stigma. And I mean, I remember a pharmacist colleague who once said that she wasn't going to invest in a 401k because she didn't understand what it was. And that was her rationale. And this is a highly educated woman. So I say that not to knock her, because I definitely have my own issues and made my own mistakes, which I've already admitted. But just to illustrate how it doesn't matter your educational level, it doesn't matter the exposure. We all have our struggles with it, and we all have to try to unlearn and unstick bad habits in efforts to move forward and to build wealth and to try to pass on generational knowledge as well as that generational wealth.
And that is, yeah, that's definitely true, because we look at people and we see them at a certain level and we think they have it all. And social media, as we all talked about today, is an example of, we look at social media, we look at certain people and we think that, oh, wow, they're really wealthy. But what people portray is totally different with the reality of what's going on with those people, because anybody can dress up and look really nice. But what are their real struggles? You'll never know anybody's real struggle unless that conversation is had. Because I know personally for me, people look at me posting things of me doing a podcast, being in magazines and being on interviews, they're like, oh, well, she has it all. No, I don't. I have my own financial struggles that I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with financial healing from the financial traumas that I've experienced. I'm, healing from suicide ideations that I've had for years around finances. I'm dealing with, those things of that old me wants to still hold on, but honestly, you gotta let go of that old you in order for you to grow and be prosperous in the life that you're saying that you want for yourself. So you have to kill that old you, because that old you is not serving you, hasn't served you, and you have to learn from that to move forward. So it is a lot of fear because we want to control everything. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. We don't know what tomorrow is going to be. We don't know. The whole point is to be faithful, to trust God and believe in the path that you want to go in for yourself. So stop making excuses of, I'll do it tomorrow. Because if you can even say, I can do it tomorrow, you could already been working on it. So if you're saying, oh, I'll do it next week, you could have already did it that week. If you're saying next month, or you're saying, oh, well, I'm going to eat this real good meal because Thanksgiving is coming and Christmas is coming. Okay, eat that great meal, but guess what? Work out the next day, or work out the morning before you eat that good meal, or work out after you eat that good meal. We got to stop making excuses, because tomorrow is not promised. Today is not promised, because you can literally go drive somewhere and get hit and don't know what's going to happen. So we have to honestly make these changes now, today. You have to put it in your mind, I want to make these changes. You got experts on this panel that has said to you, hey, do a consultation. Consultations don't cost for most people. Have that conversation. If it is 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever the consultation is, trust me, that consultation could be life-changing for you. I had a consultation with Ariana, and like I said, it was life-changing for me. It put a lot of things in perspective of what my why is or what I want. Margaret, she's a therapist. She works with a lot of clients that she sees, and especially in the Black community, finances is the main issue. And we use that excuse, oh, the white man is keeping us down. The white man ain't keeping us down, it's us that's keeping us down. So we have to learn to overcome that and stop making excuses and stop blaming everybody. We got to look at ourselves and start taking accountability for ourselves, because again, like I said, nothing is promised to us unless we make the efforts to do it for ourselves. Invest in your health, invest in your mental, invest in your wellness, invest in your finances, invest in you, because you are where it begins, ends, and starts. So please do the investing in you. I don't care if it's either one of us that you contact, contact somebody to get the help, because if we knew how to do it by ourselves, we would do it. We would have done it a long time ago, because God has put these specialists in the place to help us, because we don't know how to do it. I'm a health coach. I have 2 health coaches that help me in many areas. I have, as I said, I work with Ariana. I work with many people, because don't think because I'm a professional and I do certain things that you can't have people to help you with that. Because if I knew everything, I wouldn't need any help. So we don't know everything. I work with therapists as well. So just think about, you go to get your nails done. If you knew how to do most of us do know how to do our nails, but we go pay to get our nails done. If hairstylists, think about it. I know how to do my hair. I hate doing my hair. So I go to my hairstylist every 2 weeks. So because my hair is natural, I'm not great with natural hair. So that's why I pay her and I go to her. So think about those things, what you're investing your money in. So if you could do it yourself, would you do it? Or do you enjoy doing it? Because like I said, I don't enjoy doing my hair. I pay to get my hair done. So I don't enjoy driving to DC. I pay Lyft to take me to DC because I personally hate driving in DC. It gives me anxiety. So think about the things that you invest money in that you don't like doing, or you don't, may not know how to do, or may not want to do. Think about that and think about, wow, I have been struggling with depression. I have been struggling with anxiety. I have been struggling with really getting my budget together. Maybe I need a plan. I have been struggling in the area of fitness. Maybe I need a trainer to help me with accountability. I have been struggling with my eating. Maybe I need a nutritionist or a dietitian to help me in that area. I really haven't been doing my physicals or mammograms or pap smears in the time frame I'm supposed to do it. Maybe I need to start doing that because I'm noticing my health is declining. So let's start doing that. Let's start really incorporating becoming better instead of making the same excuses, because it's not working. And pretty much, if you don't own your own business and you work for somebody and you paying for insurance coming out your check bi-weekly and you're not going to the doctor, you wasting money. Because trust me, when you get to that stage 4 of any cancer, you could have stopped it at the beginning stage. So think about that. Please start going to the doctor. If you feel a lump, if you bumped your knee and after 3 days you still can't walk, go to the doctor, because it could be something more. We don't know. If we had x-ray vision, we wouldn't have to go. So please start investing in your health. I'm being so serious because I've seen it many times before. I talked to an ex-coworker. She just found out years ago. I worked with her at Macy's, and she's telling me that she has all these health issues now that she could have prevented in the early 2000s, but she waited because she didn't want to spend the money on a copay. Copay is a whole lot cheaper than you paying hundreds and thousands of dollars for something you could have prevented in the beginning stages. So just think about that. Think about making better decisions. Think about breaking those habits. I don't want to spend the money on, but then think about what you are spending money on and how is that benefiting you? Because if you're eating out every week and you're eating unhealthy and you're supersizing it, but then you think, oh, well, I can walk around the neighborhood. It doesn't work like that. Please believe it doesn't, because I've seen so many clients that do that. And I've worked with clients that, they're still eating the same things that they're eating, And they're like, well, I'm not losing weight. You're not losing weight because you didn't make any nutritional changes. You didn't make any mindset changes. So you're not going to be successful in those areas. Think about those things. Invest in yourself. Put yourself first. Do what you need to do for you. If you need to start journaling and start writing down, I am going to be healthier by whatever next Saturday is. I am going to, work on my finances by December 31st, 2022. Start writing down what you want and what that looks like. Start researching people that you want to work with to help you become better. Trust me, it will change your life. It will put things in perspective for you. It will start giving you realization and awareness. Please start doing those things. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the people that's on this panel today. Let it be somebody that helps you and has the experience to guide you in the direction that you need to be in. And I'm saying this from our own personal perspective because, again, I've struggled. And I don't want to continue to see anyone else continue to be stuck, to continue to struggle, to continue to be in the places that they're in, because it is not healthy. I used to get sick every week from sinus infections because I was so financially stressed out. I was anorexic because I didn't have money to eat, so I just didn't eat. So I'm telling you, invest in yourself. And I thank my panel for joining me today. You guys can find me at LaJuneSingleton.com. Again, my consultations are free. I do payment plans. And also ask people, hey, do you offer payment plans? Because don't be like, well, I know they don't offer payment plans. You don't know until you ask. Ask questions. That's another thing we need to do as Black women. Ask questions. We don't ask questions. We make assumptions. Ask questions, because that one question can be life-changing. Do you take payment plans? How often do I need to pay you? Ask those questions. What all are the services that come with this? How often can I contact you? Because my clients, I tell them all the time, when I have sessions with them, they'll tell me something about, oh, well, I went somewhere, I didn't know what to eat. Well, why didn't you text me? So my text is always available for clients. So please believe that, even past clients still contact me because I do want to know how they're doing. So please contact whoever. If it's Ariana, if it's me, if it's Margaret, please contact someone. If it's not us, please contact someone. I don't even care who it is. If you have depression or mental health, please contact someone. Don't think you're okay, because there's a lot of people that have committed themselves to suicide or, just straight depression, not coming out the house. And we're still, in a pandemic, even though Biden said we're not. We still are. COVID is still out there. The monkeypox. People are scared of the monkeypox. So please contact somebody for help. Again, you can reach me at LaJuneSingleton.com. Thank you, Ariana. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Frida. If anyone has any questions, you feel free, please contact any one of these lovely ladies and myself to get the help that you need. Thank you guys so much again. Anyone wants to say anything before we leave? Ariana or Margaret?
No, I'm all set.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
jumping on. Natasha is actually one of my fitness clients. So it's awesome to see you. I appreciate you. Wanted to acknowledge you for your support. And yeah, I'm happy to be a part of the experience. Thank you, LaJune.